All right. What's up, YouTube? So, in this video, I'm going to explain to you, out of 4 years of homesteading so far, some life lessons I've learned that are applicable whether you are homesteading or one day you want to have a homestead or you're just passionate about community and long term thinking. Because all of the lessons that I've learned, which I'm going to highlight in this video, are things that it's like you'll see an Instagram post of someone grabbing chicken eggs out of their coop, and you're like, "Oh my god, I wish I had chickens, and chicken eggs are so expensive." It's like there's so much behind the scenes you don't see, but I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I'm not saying, "Oh, it looks good to have chickens, but it actually sucks." It's like, sure, there are parts of it that suck, but it's actually so much better than can be explained in Instagram posts. So I like doing this more long form style video so that I can really elaborate on the different points that I see makes a lot of sense. So I got some notes I'm going to kind of follow along. I have this post. It'll be going up in a day or two on my Substack as well. That I really elaborate this and I put some photos in and everything because I spent years living in cities or in the suburbs. I did not grow up on a farm. I did not grow up outside the city. I didn't grow up with guns. I didn't grow up with animals. Well, we had a dog growing up, but that's about it. And there's a level of life ruthlessness that you're exposed to being more out of the city, and there's a level of hardening you get, but that's not a bad thing. It's like you get faced with the reality of life, and it's actually fucking awesome. And so I'm gonna lay out. There's like 5 or so little lessons I learned here, and again, my YouTube, my content game. I'm definitely going all out with bringing it to the next level. So bear with me as I'm learning like CapCut and these skill sets here, because I haven't had the time to do this over the past 4 years. I've had my business. We've been building a local community. I have my wife. I have my kids. And just a lot of things happening. But now that things have kind of stabilized in different areas, I can go all out and make the content because I've learned a lot of really cool things over the years of doing this. And I know there's a huge demand for this. I see it often. People posting on social media of like, hey, I want the house and the wraparound porch and I want this. And, the wife will joke, oh, it's Valentine's Day. All I want is 10 acres and some chickens. It's like, I get the appeal and it's really cool, but there's so much behind the scenes with it. So without further ado, let's dive in. So this first idea is that the chickens are gateway drug. And I saw this actually really funny post someone made on Instagram, and he's like, "Yeah, chickens are the gateway drug because as soon as you get them, you'll start realizing like you can cook with your own eggs, and then your wife's gonna want to make homemade bread, and then you'll start questioning why bread has all these preservatives, and then you see why bread has the preservatives, and then you start to look into the food system, and then you start looking at why are we perpetually sick, and you start looking at the monetary system and all this. It's like it was really well done. I don't have the skills right now to make like hilarious TikTok videos like that because it's just that's just not my style. But it's so true that you'll see these things on social media that will pull you in, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's the dream. That's the dream." Yeah, and especially too when you're like sick and tired of the current phase of your life, you'll have that grass is greener syndrome happen, and then you'll be like, "Oh yeah, life would be so much easier if I had more land and more animals." It's like ain't the case, but it's actually better, and I'll tell you why. And again, this is me years and years and years in the making, being able to pull this off and have this. And so it's like it's not just a simple little fix of like, okay, I'm going to make a decision and then we're going to go find one. It's like there's a lot of planning that goes into this. But I want to dive in on this. So people think, okay, egg prices are high, therefore I think it'd be cheaper if I had chickens. Now, I guess if you're really good at recycling your food scraps and everything, sure. I know there's people out there who do like the homesteading on a budget, but it's like I'm not trying to homestead on a budget. It's like chickens are expensive. You got to make sure that, like here where I live in the winter, you're putting in feed. Like the chickens got to eat. They can't just free range, all winter long. And there's a level of realization you get where it's like I am pouring money and energy into this system here, and whether or not the eggs are cheaper or better, if that's your intention behind doing it because you want cheaper eggs, you're going to burn out real quick. But if your intention is, hey, I want to be more connected to the food that I have, and I want to be more connected to seeing how does nature really work, and I want to have that experience where I can enjoy, having my own animals and all that. That's what's really cool about it. Because I underestimated this early on in my journey with it. And I'll get to the story about the ducks in a little bit. That's like, I think, point number 4 in here. But for the first part, it's like, it's not about life. It's not about finding a cheaper way to do things. It's about finding a different way to take more responsibility in your life. And that's the actual really cool part. Like that was behind the scenes that I kind of thought was going to happen. But when you actually go through it, it's amazing. So that leads me to point 2. This is that when you have more space around you, it affects you and how you think. For example, wherever you live right now, do you have neighbors on all sides of you? You live in an apartment. Like, how often are you interrupted just by the sound of your environment? Now, I had spent many years in different cities. I remember when I was living in Brazil back when, so I was in university and I spent 6 months in Brazil. And I remember it was like very fascinating because one, you have just different climate, so different like environment, which that took some acclimating to get to. You have different language and everything, but it's like when I was there, they were preparing for the World Cup and they were having carnival as well. And it was like for example, the garbage companies went on strike because they were pissed that the World Cup was coming in and like putting all this money towards stadiums. And they're like, dude, like we're getting screwed over by our government here. So they would go on strike. Then you had the police go on strike. And it's like things like that where I was forced to see right in front of me, like this is how fragile society is. And this is how interconnected everything is. Where like my own, let's say, safety and my own ability to like just go get groceries from the store is now affected because all of these systems are interplaying. Or at a time when I was living in Valparaiso, Chile, and at night, like the first night I got there, I get to my apartment, I'm like chilling, try to fall asleep, and at 2 a.m. I'm woke up by like 30 dogs just barking and going crazy. I'm like, damn, are they fighting? Are they like killing someone? Like it sounded brutal. And it went for hours and I couldn't sleep. And I was just like, dude, what where am I? Contrast that to now where I live. It's like at night, sure, I might hear some coyotes, but it's like it's pretty damn still and pretty quiet. And that does something to you. Like my blood pressure is less high. I'm definitely I'm a different person now too. I've done a lot of self-development work, but it's like having that space does something to you, and it's something we're striving for. I know some of you listening to this can't actually pull off the homestead thing right now, but maybe it's in your 5-year vision. That's great. I'm here to help catalyze that for you because I want to see a lot more people have this option, at least because where the world's headed, there's a lot of this talk of like, cities growing and getting bigger. And then there's also a lot of people trying to move out of the cities, but I'm just giving you my narrative on what I've seen firsthand from actually doing this for the past 4 years. And so it's something we're striving for. Now, this leads me to my third point, which is people talk about off-grid living. Like you'll see sometimes people want to do the homesteading thing or move out of the city out of a reaction. I'm telling you, your starting point will be your end point. So if your starting point is to do it out of you reacting, you will end up just creating another shitstorm you react to. And so what I would really recommend is be clear on why you're doing it. So I just want to bust this myth. I want to break this spell that's on a lot of people. They start seeing, oh, I don't like living in the city. I don't like living in the suburbs. I want to go off grid. And they think of that idea like, yeah, I'm just going to go off grid. I'm going to somehow get my own power. I'm going to get some solar panels. I'm going to somehow magically like not have to use money. I'm just going to like grow my own food and it's going to be great. I'm telling you for 2 reasons that it's not the most effective way to look at it. One is because the idea of off grid is a myth. Like you're not going to be able to do it. If you want to go live in a tent and go forage, I guess you could, but like you're gonna have to have money. You're gonna have to have some interaction with your neighbors. You're gonna have to like if you want to build a fence or you need to, you have animals and you got to move big bales of hay. You're realistically gonna probably have some like vehicles, like you might have a tractor or something. You're gonna have to get gas from the gas station. There's no such thing as fully off grid. I mean, I'm sure there's a tiny fraction of people who actually pull it off, but that is a full-time thing. Like you can't also have a job at that time. You can't also work from home from your little Starlink and then be doing that. It's like I appreciate the sentiment that you want to be more self-sustaining, and I think that's a great thing to strive for. But get it out of your head, this idea of I'm going to fully isolate myself from the world. Here's the other reason why I don't recommend doing that is because a lot of times, again, it's a reaction to people seeing, oh God, the cities are going to shit, the crime is up, whatever. And people have all these narratives. The idea of then running away and just isolating yourself, thinking you're going to be okay, from my perspective, that's a cop-out. Here's how I look at it. Maybe it'll resonate with my philosophy. I see the state of the world. I see the state of cities. I lived in Minneapolis, over 2020 when a lot of different things were happening. You had the COVID lockdowns. You had everything that happened with George Floyd. You had the aftermath of that. You had them talking about defunding the police. The crime did skyrocket. Like there were a lot of factors there where, yes, I get why people would say, I got to get out of the cities and everything. But I looked at that as saying, okay, well, yes, I might be in a position to get out of the city. But what about all the other thousands of people who that's not practical for, or they may not fully comprehend that or even see that? What if my role is to have a access to kind of the more homesteading, sustainable way of living, but from the intention of building more of a blueprint of how can you do sustainable living, building community, building culture, teaching people different ways they can act in a more sustainable way. Then whether someone wants to live in the city and then they can, we can work on passing different laws and everything so that they can have like chickens and a little garden and, a little food forest or something. Like you can do a lot whether you live in the city or in the country. And so from my perspective, I see it as a cop out to just try and be like, I'm going to move 12 hours away and just, live in the middle of nowhere. It's like, let's not let it get that bad, because with enough of us working together, you can change the culture. You can influence the next generation of kids to be super genius. Like that's a big thing we work on. I'll get to that at the end of this video. And we can build really cool community, because it's not like you need 100% of people to be on the same page. It's like you need about 5 to 10% of the people to be on the same page. And then we can start to put people forth into positions of influence, such as people behind the media companies, people getting into all levels of politics, from local level to state level to even federal level. That's the bigger picture. And so we do the homesteading, not just because we want to be outside the city. We do the homesteading to show people here's a way of living, but we're also 40 minutes from the city. So we can give people a little like escape from the city. Like, let's say, we have some friends who will come stay with us, overnight sometimes, whatever. And they will then have a little break from the city and then they'll go back. And so it creates a really cool network of what's possible. And so that's more how I would encourage you to look at it, is don't run away. Like running away is like, come on now, don't do that. And for those of you who are hardcore, who are like, there's going to be 15-minute cities and they're going to have digital ID and social credit system, which, don't get me wrong, I know that there are plans in place for that. Let's not let it get to that point. Let's not just give up on everything and fucking run away. Because guess what? You go, oh, I'm going to go off grid because I think it's going to be so dangerous in the cities. Okay. Then what? For a year, and then all of a sudden a drone will come to your door and go, hey, you haven't registered for the latest census, and we now have your property is, under review for, your deed or whatever. It's like, you can't isolate yourself from the system. We have to go change the system. The only way out is through. And I want you to understand that. You might fully get that now, and you're like, hell yeah, this is what I've been looking for. Or you might still fight that, but I'm telling you, the only way out is through. And so that's what I'll get to at the like kind of second half of this video, is how me and my wife look at this, and how we've already built a pretty substantial community of people who are like-minded. So over the next 10 years, we can actually make the real change we need to make, instead of us just sleepwalking our way into dystopia, because that's where the world's headed right now. All right, so now let's wind it back. So I was talking about chickens being the gateway drug. Actually, so this is part 4. For us, it was actually ducks. We're the gateway drug. Who would have thought? Where we live in kind of a small town, and we have some family friends of Jessica who have a place out here as well. And that's actually how we found this town. And we went out to visit them one time, and it was so cool because they had like ducks and chickens and all this food, and the wife was making homemade kombucha and homemade bread and all this stuff. And every time we'd visit them, they'd be like, hey, here's like 24 eggs. We can't eat them in time. Hey, here's some bread. Hey, here's this. Here's some tincture. Here's some this. I'm like, holy shit. She's like, here's a jar of honey. I'm like, can I like pay you? She's like, no, we literally have too much. Like, just we can swap. We can trade some time. It was just like abundance shoved in my face. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. And then we saw how their kids would like take care of the ducks every day. And that was like one of their chores and responsibilities. And then we saw like just the way that they thought about like homestead living in the community they built. I was like, this is epic. So this is back when we were still living in closer to the cities. So finally, we ended up after a while, we ended up finding the place we have now. And there's a whole story to that too. But so we move in, and we're kind of talking about, okay, at some point, we'll get some animals, whatever. It was like summertime when we moved in, and then we were having our wedding within like 2 months. So I don't remember if I don't think we got the birds before the wedding. Maybe it was right around that time. But anyway, so we knew we were going to be hosting a lot of people for like a week. We had people come out. We had like a ton of our friends and everyone come to our wedding too. But then at a certain point, I remember, because I was starting to get used to this homestead thing. I was starting to get used to like, okay, gotta maintain the property. The fence is falling apart, whatever. I'm just like getting more in that mindset. And then one day we're at this farm supply store. And it was really funny because Jess, she's very good at see, you got to get yourself a life partner, whether it be your wife, your husband, whatever, where they're very good at knowing what you want. And so they're very good at influencing you in a way that you like kind of want to be influenced. It's like sales. Like, I don't resist salespeople. Like if I'm actually looking for something I want to get, I want the person to sell me on it. Like that's just more my style. So anyway, we're at this tractor supply store, and that's what it's called, tractor supply or something like that. And I'm just like looking around for a shovel or something, and Jess comes up to me. She's like, "Babe, you gotta come here." And so I'm walking over. I'm like, where are we going? I'm like, there's these bins on the ground. And there's like a cage around them. I'm like, what is this? And then I hear this like chirp, chirp, chirp. I'm like looking in there. I'm like, oh, is that like chickens? Like, what the hell is this? Some birds? And she picks one up and she's like, "Babe, look at it." And I was like, "Okay." I'm like, like I'm not gonna pet it. Like I don't want that right now. She's like, "Yeah, but I was talking to the guy who works here, and he said that they're getting to that age where if no one takes them today, they gotta like take them out back, like get rid of them." I was just like, she's like, "Please, babe, we've always wanted, we talked about getting birds, whatever." And I was like, oh my God, we're really doing this. All right. So we get the birds, but then you got to get fencing and then you got to get all this other stuff, right? So I'm just like, okay, what you got to get a little waterer and some food and everything. So it's like, as fun as it is to think, oh, I'm just going to get some baby chickens and they're going to just frolic around in the field and magically be okay. And they'll just produce eggs for me. It's like, it ain't that simple. So anyway, we get the ducks, whatever. So there were ducks, and we had friends who had ducks, and you can like eat duck eggs, and they're like really good, and you can cook with them, and they're like kind of a more bougie version of a chicken. And so I said, okay, cool, we got our ducks. What I didn't realize was just how much I was going to learn from these ducks. Okay, maybe this is like some subconscious program from my childhood because I loved that movie Mighty Ducks, the Disney movie. Right, that's like the one Disney movie I liked. I don't know. Grew up in Minnesota. The movie was filmed in Minnesota. Maybe I was just like programmed for this is like my destiny right here. Okay, to become one with these ducks. Okay, to be part of to just be connected to these ducks. So anyway, every day I'm going out there, making sure they got water, everything, and it's nice. It's fall time. Colors are changing. The sun is still out. It's like beautiful, right? And these little cute ducks are just like frolicking around. Sometimes they fly out of the little fence and they come back. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm enjoying this. Then fast forward, it's like December, and now it starts getting really cold. So we move them into our stable, and we put the hay out. We got a little setup for them. Anyway, at a certain point, it starts getting brutally cold. Like I'm talking like 0 degrees, -10 degrees, like Fahrenheit. And so every day though, these ducks need water, and that was the big first lesson I learned. And again, this is symbolic of life. When you have things you got to take care of, whether it be animals, whether it be kids, whether it be a business, whatever that is. Maybe you got a parent or someone you got to take care of, right? Your ability to make excuses goes out the window. You can't. I guess you can, but then the thing is gonna die. And so I'm like, wow, am I really gonna be that guy who like neglects my ducks and then they fucking die? Like I'm not gonna do that. And so it really forces you to level up. And it was so cool because I got to enjoy that. And I just remember sitting there sometimes, like my hands are freezing. I'm like at the well, like filling up this water, lugging over this big thing of water. Like I didn't even need to go to the gym because I'm getting a workout every day, just like lifting shit all the time. And then I'm just like enjoying having these ducks, even though I'm like, this is brutal. I'm like cold, and we're getting maybe 2 eggs in the winter. I'm like, 2 eggs per day or per, every few days. But I'm like, I am benefiting from this so much more than I thought I was going to. But it took a lot of understanding on my part. And then the other cool thing, this was even like a deeper realization I got. Like, see, who would have thought from a freaking duck you could learn so much? But I'm just telling you the lessons I've learned. And I'm curious. And if you have lessons you've learned from homesteading too, put it in the comments because I always enjoy this stuff. So if you think about it, it's like homesteading. A lot of the appeal of it is you get more calibrated to nature and the natural cycles of the world because you typically spend more time outside, tend to have animals, food, things like that going on. So I'm still like a toddler in my homesteading phase. And then spring rolls around, we get the chickens moved outside. We got a nice new coop we got, and like it's pretty cool. Then we got a bunch of chicks in the spring, so like proper chickens. And then they start growing up. Turns out we have a rooster in there. One day though, I come out and I'm like seeing all these feathers in just kind of like pulled out. And I was like, what is going on? Did one of our birds die? And I started to see like, oh, this rooster doesn't like this duck. And then I started to notice too, and I noticed the duck was kind of hobbling because the duck would, I don't know, these ducks waddle weird, whatever. Long story short, this duck was somewhat injured, whether they got injured on their own or from the rooster. But then animals can be totally savage. So once they notice one is weak, they will go after it to basically like kill it. And I'm like, damn, this is intense. Okay. So I'm like watching this, and this duck is so cute. Like, I love this duck. She's like reliable. She's like, laying an egg a day. I'm like, oh, she's like an asset. Like, I can't justify just getting rid of this duck just because this rooster is attacking it. So I was like, okay, let's separate them. Right. So I talked to some friends. I built a little structure, and then we end up separating them. Every night I have to go out there. I gotta lock up this little makeshift coop we have. I got the chicks over here, whatever, and it's good. Like, we're getting along, things are going pretty good. By the fall time, though, this is fascinating. Actually, funny enough, the day Aristotle was born, so our first son, that evening I had to go out because it was like around the time I had to like build this new little structure. So I just remember, like, my son was just born, and then the midwife and everyone was still here, and I was like, our ducks are gonna die. And my wife's like, go on, you can do it. So I had to like build this little makeshift structure for them. It was just, I was like, wow, this has become my life. Like 4 years ago, I was just like living in the city, like didn't even know where my food came from in the grocery store. And now I'm like, have all this responsibility on my plate. And it was like very overwhelming. But when you rise to the occasion, you get stronger from it. It's just like if you go to a really intense workout, it's like this is like a mental, emotional, spiritual workout, is like taking on responsibility. So long story short, that duck did not get any better. And I had to, and every day for like 3 weeks, I'm like, I think I got to kill that duck. And I was like, I can't bring myself to do it. And then I was like, maybe it'll get better. And then another day, and then another day. Finally, I had to make the decision. I just talked to Jess. I was like, okay, Jess, I'm making a judgment call here by, whatever, Wednesday night. If it ain't better, I'm taking it out. And then I ended up having to do it because it's like kindness. So being nice and being kind are two different things. And this is the life lesson. Being nice is being like, oh, poor little duck, and you just pet the duck and you just hope it gets better. Kindness is like, or be like if you, I don't know, you hit some animal on, you're driving down the road and you hit a squirrel. Okay. And that squirrel is still twitching. Like, that squirrel is alive, but it's like paralyzed. Nice is like, I guess I'll just leave it here, or like wrap it in a little towel and like hope it gets better. But it's like literally in fucking agony. Kind is you being able to make that judgment call and then act on it decisively and like put the squirrel out of its misery. Or for me, it was like, all right, got to put the duck out of its misery. And it was very interesting for me. Some people are probably just like, dude, come on, you like, it's just a duck. Who cares? And I know there are people who like butcher animals every day. And to them, because like I watch some of these homesteaders on YouTube, they're like, to me, opening a box of crackers and like snapping a bird's neck is like the same thing. I'm like, I'm not at that level yet. Okay. So for me, I'm like, feeling bad for this duck, but I'm like, gotta just take it out. Okay, let's do it. And I did that. And then over time, right, we actually ended up just getting rid of all the ducks. And I had a friend here who he grew up like on a farm in Mexico, and he's like very good at it. He had like a machete, he had a whole system to it. He was teaching me. I'm like, wow, this is actually such a valuable skill set, because when I'm raising now my sons, I can now teach them. So like the whole time I'm like learning, like this is like my bonus lesson in this. The whole time I've been doing the homesteading thing, I'm always learning. I have a neighbor who came over one time. He identified like 40 trees on our property, and the whole time I'm asking him questions. So I'm learning it, and then I'm integrating this information. And I'm like learning how to like process a duck. I'm learning how to like repair a fence. I'm learning how to like all this stuff. And I've become a learning machine over the years. And it is so valuable because now I don't have to go like hire experts outside and like depend on them. I can learn how to do anything that I need to do. So this kindness point, though, is so important, because in your life right now, I'm sure there's areas where you're just being nice. And I'm sure there's something that's like that version of the duck for you, where you're like, oh, that is something that I know I need to address, but it's uncomfortable or whatever. Insert 12 excuses here, and you don't do it, but you got to go face it. So there's that. Now, here's the final point I want to make in this video. Is it's really like a synthesis of all the points so far. So I look at like all the cool stuff that we're doing here. For example, we have a food forest that we're working on. We have pretty epic garden. I'll include some photos in here too on the video. And we're also raising genius kids. Like, our kids are noticeably smart. Well, our older son specifically, like he's 2.5, almost 3, but his ability to have conversation and use words and express himself and be stable and regulate himself is awesome. And now we have all these other families around us too, where we're doing the homeschool thing, but on a whole nother level. So like homeschool, I don't really like that word, because it's like school is still the same thing. It's like, here's how to indoctrinate someone. So people sometimes do homeschool, but then they just follow some curriculum. As opposed to our approach is, no, we have a very specific method by which a kid learns, but then they're able to just build in the essentials that they need. And then you can go essentially co-create like all the lessons for them in the real world. So our son now, he's like learning, like, what is he learning about now? He's learning about magnets the other day, like how do magnets work. He's like learning about all sorts of stuff with my wife. They're making a lot of different kinds of foods now. They're always learning things, but it's a very structured way of doing learning. So here's the point: is we are now creating community for our kids, for the, let's say teenagers and adults in our community, and then also the adults that are also like parents, and then they have their own kids too. So, and I'll give you an example of this story. So once a month, we host what's called a clubhouse at our house, and it's invite only, but it's the people we can see in the community that we trust at our home, and we're cool with them being around our kids, everything. And then we have some sort of like actual discussion on this kind of thing, right? Like leveling up in life, like it's like the real support that people are looking for. And then occasionally we'll do some sort of event afterwards or an event right before or something. So one of these times we did like tree planting. We had like 15 trees. We needed to put them in. It was like kind of the end of the summer, and it was a really rainy day. And I was like, oh man, are people really going to want to go out there in the rain? But I was like, I had to learn this lesson too of being cool, like asking for help, because I know inherently it's going to be a valuable experience for all of us. I'm not just asking for like, help me and you won't get anything in return. It's like, no, like you help, but then we have like food to feed you. And, it's like, it's going to be a fun experience. And what's so awesome is we had kids that had never planted a tree before, part of it. And I asked them, I was like, look, you could stay outside. It's raining, whatever. They're like, no, I want to go do it. And you realize like, wow, when you can give these kids like chores and responsibilities and things to do, they, especially young boys, maybe it's just because I'm have two sons and I grew up with a brother or whatever. It's like, I know more how to interact with like a young boy than a young girl. But either way, these kids, they're like digging with the shovel and they're like trying to, dig faster than each other. And it was just so much fun. But then you had these adults or, like 20-some-year-olds that, some are men, some are women that are like single. And so they don't have their partner yet, but they're part of this. And then you also have adults with parents with then some of the kids that were there. I was like, this is so cool because when you plant a tree, you are forced to look on a longer time horizon. Like you are forced to look at the next 7-10 years. And so some of these kids, let's say one of them's like 8. By the time he's 15, 18, he's going to now be able to like enjoy this. And he's going to be able to like have that experience of, oh, I planted this seed or I did this thing here. And now years later, I'm able to benefit from it. And you don't get the benefit right away. You plant the tree and it's like, okay, we planted the tree, right? It was fun, but the fruit doesn't grow. Think of the life lesson in that. And then you have some of the people here that are more like mid-age, and they're looking at, at some point they're going to find their future husband or future wife, and then they'll have kids. And it's like, how cool is that? You're going to be able to enjoy this that we're creating, like with your future partner. And then, so just that whole mindset has been really, really fascinating to me. I had always thought about that, and I read a lot of books. I read a ton of biographies and things like that. And you hear like how to build like an empire or a legacy. It takes time. But when you actually are doing it real time, it does something. It changes you in a way that just reading about it or just like watching a YouTube video about it doesn't exactly do. So here's the point. We are doing all of this with our homestead as a blueprint so that other people can learn how to do this in their own way. Like what works for us here in this area of Minnesota is going to be very different than if you live in, California or Texas or whatever. But nonetheless, there's some things that are true principles. One is the principles by which you and your spouse and whoever's responsible for the homestead, the principles that you agree to. Why are you doing it? What's the intention behind it? What's the ultimate goal with it? But then also how to build community and how to consistently have people come over and how to learn from your mistakes and then share from those mistakes and everything. It's like there's a whole system to it, and we're working on documenting this journey. But then also part of our bigger vision is like, so for example, I'm in my office right now, and it's in one of the outbuildings on our property. So I'm not in the house, so I don't have to worry about hearing the kids. My kids are very loud now. They're 2.5 and 6 months old. And part of this is, so now I have this offset here, but then next we're going to add like a cold plunge and a sauna out here. We're going to get a foosball table. We have, some couches and stuff. So it's kind of like a hangout spot. But then over time, I want to get like a 3D printer and like almost build it into a maker space and then a woodworking studio. So for my kids and the other kids in the community, we can now do lessons and workshops out here. So it's like the ultimate spot for like learning and building cool things. And then over time as well, it's like in the way back of our property, my wife we planted some trees and fruit bushes last year, so we can have like a camping site, or what she calls glamping, which is like glamorous camping, with like a cool geodome and all that. Because I have a lot of friends who've never been camping, and it's pretty intense to go from never camping to like out in the middle of nowhere. So it's like, hey, what if we can give people that experience where they can camp here? But let's say some chick goes crazy, they're a 3-minute walk from the house, and we'll be getting a milking cow in the spring. So people want to know like how to milk a cow, or like how to enjoy that experience. They can have that here. And then the other part is having different properties too, like around the state, where we can host things. Like I've always thought, when I was a kid, I remember going to camp, and it was like, I didn't like it. I liked it in theory, but I didn't like the camp counselors. The whole starting point of it was just kind of, it wasn't the best camp. But I was like, yo, what if we had like family camp? Like here, for example, up north in Minnesota, it's beautiful. It's like tons of forest. There's like Lake Superior, which is like one of the biggest lakes in the world. And it's just a really amazing, beautiful place. We were like, wow, what if we had like camp where like 2 weeks, all different families are coming and everything. But it's like kids learning together and the adults learning together. And that kind of thing that you're like, it was so lame when I was a kid, like, oh, a ropes course, like, oh, we're going to do that kind of thing. But actually as an adult, I'm like, dude, imagine we had like a badass like ropes course, or we can do like in the winter, we could do like sauna and like plunge in the lake and like go like snowshoeing or snowmobiling. So these kinds of experiences to show people what's possible. But the people who we invite and who are here are the people who share the same bigger purpose, which is, hey, we got to change education. We got to change how we raise our kids. We got to change the culture. We got to make it cool to take self-responsibility. And we got to make it cool to actually roll our hands up and get involved in politics and the media and this bigger, thing that we have going on here. It's like, let's stop playing this game of thinking we can't change the system. Like we actually can, but it requires us working together and then having the cool environments to make that happen. And that's why we do all this. All right. So if you like this, what I ask, like the video, actually press the little thumb thing. Okay. Because that helps it get in the algorithm, helps it get in front of more people. And I have my promise to you of making even better YouTube videos. Like I'm learning as I go, I'm able to put more time into it. Then I'm also posting a lot more on Substack as well. So I more can get my thoughts out. And there's these points that are so cool. Like earlier today, I made a post on your mind being a force field. And I put some drawings in there, everything. And I already had a person reach out. It was like, oh, there's like so much clicked in place for them. And so I have now more space and time on specific days where I can really do this when I'm not at events and going to do the other stuff. So I'm really pouring a lot into this. So what I ask is, if you like this, actually put the like and leave a comment of just like what you got out of this, or if you're in homesteading or whatever, because that just supports the overall thing, right? Because I always want to give out the best content for free to the best of my ability. And so that will just help it all grow. All right. So, and if you resonate with this or you got questions, reach out to me. You can click the link, find me on Facebook, send me a message, because I talk about this stuff a lot. I know a lot of people are interested in homesteading. I'm telling you from firsthand, actually doing it, a lot of the things I've learned. And now we have other people in our community who are also learning how to do this. And it's really cool. Like one of them, they inherited a property and they had like, I think it came with a couple goats. They're like, do we just get rid of the goats? Do we keep them? I think they kept them. So it's like, every once in a while we'll be in touch with them and we're like learning and everything. So it's a whole network, and it's only getting bigger and it's only getting more awesome. So cool. All right. See you.